What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and welcome back to yet another Altergeist deck profile. Man, we have been playing this deck for almost a year, pretty much the longest I've ever played a single deck for. I guess we played Burn Abyss at one event. But anyway, this is my profile from the Rosemont Regional. This is the last event that I'm going to before Savage Strike, as I mentioned in yesterday's video. And that's very exciting because in the next profile that we'll have for this deck, which will be at YCS Chicago, which is the first weekend that Savage Strike is legal, we will have 3 Pot of Indulgence, probably. Maybe we'll play 2, but I'm pretty sure I'll play 3 copies of literal Pot of Greed for this deck. So this is the last profile before that set and the last profile before that big change that comes with Pot of Indulgence. Like I said at the last video, like this deck didn't do super great. It didn't do super terrible either. The big problem that I had is that I took one loss in the very first round. I just got destroyed by Rongo Bongo, and that was just really unfortunate. But other than that, though, like I didn't actually lose any matches. I just kept getting draws, and I was just trying to top 8. So once I got a couple draws, I just like dropped from the tournament. But overall, I was very happy with this deck, and both of the times that I went into time, if there would have just been more turns that I could have played out, I certainly would have won. I had pretty much full control, especially in the last match that I played where I drew. It was really disappointing, and I had like 6 negates, and it's whatever. But overall, this deck ran really well, except for that first round. That was kind of unavoidable because it's not like any of the changes I made would have affected that particular matchup. I mean, he just won the die roll and comboed me. But overall, I'm really happy with Altergeist. I love this deck. So anyway, let's talk about this deck. Let's talk about how Trap Trick, I mean, honestly, Trap Trick just makes this deck so much better. I severely underrated Trap Trick in this deck, and I'll spend a pretty big portion of this video just talking about that card. But anyway, first we have 3 copies of Altergeist Marionetter, and then we have 3 copies of Altergeist Multifaker, 3 copies of Altergeist Smiluseek, 2 copies of the one that I can't pronounce, and 1 Altergeist Conquery. I always mention this combo, but this was like one of the events where it was most impactful for me. I actually just sat on a defense position level 2 and a Conqueror in hand against Thunder Dragons for 4 turns in a row and just like decimated his entire board. It was actually crazy. Thunder Dragons are kind of funny. If you can chain block the Titan, a lot of times they just don't have monster removal. Colossus is a very good card, don't get me wrong, and the deck is full of very good cards, but outside of Titan destroying cards, they don't have a lot of like spot removal in the deck. So if you can chain block that, which you usually can because you have lots of chainable cards in here, you can just stop your opponent from killing you, and this is a really good combo to sort of just stall a ton of turns so you can actually deal with their field, and it deals with some of the field a little bit at a time, so that's kind of cool. But those are the Altergeists. You can't really play any more of those. I'm just kind of playing as many as possible of the good ones. And then we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom. There'll probably be a day when this card isn't good anymore in the main deck. There was already a time when this card first came out. It wasn't really a main deck staple because there are just too many cards it wasn't good against, but at least for the time being, there are a lot of decks this hits. It's pretty much the most generic hand trap you can play. It might not be the best against every single deck, but it at least works against every single deck, unlike cards like Ghost Ogre or Reaper or even Ghost Spell. And yeah, it's really good, and it seems to be getting better too, just because of like obviously when you Desires and then you Ash it, it's really good, but even Pot of Indulgence, I think it's still pretty good to remove the resources from your opponent's extra deck without them getting 2 draws. And then this is going to be the last time, maybe we'll play like 1 copy of this going forward, but this will probably be the last time we play Pot of Duality for a long time, and I love this card. I didn't actually draw it at 1 copy. I was trying to play 2, but I had to make some room for some other stuff, because with Trap Trick, you have to play so many 2-ofs that it really cuts down on the space for stuff like Duality, but we'll obviously swap this out for Pot of Indulgence. Maybe the right ratio is like 3 Indulgence, 1 Duality, but I think I'll probably just stick with the 3 Indulgences. We're not quite sure yet. I got a couple weeks to figure that out. But Duality is a great card in this deck. I still love it more than Desires, and I'm really glad that Indulgence is coming out because it has the best of both worlds. It doesn't banish from your main deck, but also it draws 2 cards, so it's really good. And then I played 2 Secret Village. This is part of like the Trap Trick engine because of Metaverse and stuff, and I'll talk about that in a second here. But Secret Village, really good card against Sky Strikers and Thunder Dragons. Not so good against any of the other matchups. It's okay going first against like Dark Warriors sometimes. They do have a lot of monster extenders, but some of their better cards are spells, so depending on their hand, you can stop stuff like Soul Charge or Monster Reborn, or sometimes like the equip spells are pretty good to have. They don't want to draw a whole bunch of them, but each equip spell is at least fairly decent to draw, except for Phoenix Blade. So Secret Village usually can stop any deck of those 3 if you go first and can counter them. Really good against Sky Strikers going second as well. So the big change the big the big difference between this list and last list is Trap Trick. So the reason I'm playing this card now is because at the last regional, the Columbus regional, the one of the two matches that I lost was a mirror match, and he was playing Trap Trick, and he just obliterated me because these were rivalries. I didn't directly just swap them out for rivalries, but it ended up being that way. You're swapping out 3 of a card for 3 of a different card, and so these were rivalries. And the thing about rivalry is that it's really good against Sky Strikers and Well, not Thunder Dragons, but Sky Strikers and Goki and Dark Warrior and those types of decks. Very similar to Secret Village. And the thing about that, though, is that in the other matchups, it's really bad. Like, there were multiple times I drew it, like, rivalry in my opening hand against Geist and against, or I guess the other Geist player, and then, like, Cyber Dragons was bad against, ABC was bad against. So there's all these decks up there that those cards, just rivalry in general, isn't good against, but you want to play Floodgates for the matchups where you need them, but you don't want to draw them in the matchups where you don't need them. Kind of obvious stuff here. And Trap Trick fills in the blanks because in the matchups where you want Floodgates, this card can be a Floodgate by setting Metaverse and then activating Secret Village. But in the matchups where you don't need the Floodgates, it can be a number of other cards. So that's why this card is so good. I'll sort of keep the Trap Tricks cards aside, because that's kind of important to look at. So first off, we have 3 personal spoofing and 2 Altergeist protocol. So you can't set these off of Trap Trick, which is pretty obvious because they're not normal spells. And at first I thought that was like a huge hindrance. I thought that Trap Trick was best in decks like Paleos because they all are normal traps and stuff like that. But now I've sort of changed my mind. The reason I changed my mind is that Trap Trick restricts you from activating any more than 1 trap card for the rest of the turn after it resolves. The cool thing though is that that's activating the trap card, not activating the trap card effect. Which means if you have like a hand that is like Trap Trick, Protocol, and Spoofing, you can flip the Spoofing, you can flip the Protocol, and you can flip the Trap Trick all in the same chain. And as long as the Protocol and Spoofing are already face up by the time the Trap Trick resolves, you can still use their effects, which is like crazy. So more so in this deck, I think I figured out that the reason that Trap Trick is so good is because you have these super powerful continuous spells that you can take advantage of even after you've resolved the Trap Trick, unlike decks where they are playing a ton of normal spells and like the Trap Trick is always going to be the last thing that they use, otherwise they'll lock out their whole back row. So that's one of the reasons I really like Trap Trick in this deck, and it turned out really good. So those are some of the only cards you can't set with a Trap Trick, but they also sort of combo with the Trap Trick by getting around its restriction. So now onto the cards that Trap Trick sets. So first off, I played 2 Manifestation. I was playing 1 for the longest time, but because you can set it with Trap Trick, because the idea was basically to play a bunch of cards that no matter which matchup I was playing, Trap Trick would be good against, and that's kind of what Manifestation fills out, because the other cards are sort of like defensive cards in most cases, where Manifestation is an engine card. At the end of the day, though, I don't think that this card is like really worth playing anymore with Pot of Indulgence. I think that you need to like make some space for, like, I think easily cutting one of these for Pot of Indulgence would be pretty good. I just never set this card off of the Trap Trick, but it's cool having the option, at least at the moment, for the next couple weeks, if you're going to like regionals and stuff and you want to like play Altergeist or Trap Trick, it is cool having the option to set an engine card with the Trap Trick. Next up, we have 3 Impermanents. Obviously, you're going to play this card in the deck, but it's really cool with Trap Trick. And one of the reasons it's so cool with Trap Trick is because you get to choose which column that you set it in with Trap Trick, which is really nice because a lot of times when you set like 3 or 4 back row, and your opponent will just set like their best card in the column that you don't have a back row in, and then when your opponent's like ends their turn or whatever, you can Trap Trick and set the Impermanents in that column that they were trying to play around your Impermanents with. So that's really cool. I did that a few times. Also, we have 2 copies of Metaverse. So once again, the reason Trap Trick is so good is because in the matchups where you need a Floodgate, you now have 7 copies of it. You have the 3 Trap Trick, you have the 2 Metaverse, you have the 2 Secret Village. But in the matchups where you don't need that Floodgate, you only have 4 copies, just a Secret Village and the Metaverses themselves. And then what's even cooler, and the other problem that I was having, was that when I was side decking at the last regional, a lot of times what would happen is, like in the Altergeist mirror match, I just didn't have enough cards to side in and to actually take out all of the rivalries and secret villages, where nowadays in this version of the deck, when you side deck, you don't have to take out the Trap Trick. You actually want to keep those in against the slower matchups because you have these heavy Storm Dusters that you can set. So when you're side decking, all you have to take out for the Geist mirror pretty much is the 2 Metaverse and the 2 Secret Village, where you used to have to find space for taking out the Secret Villages and the Metaverses and the Rivalry of Warlords, and it ended up I just didn't have enough side deck cards to actually put in, so I ended up like main decking, or I ended up side decking Evenly Match even when I was going first, which is not a great play. But so these are all the cards that you can set off a trap trick, and you can kind of see there's always going to be a matchup where at least one of these cards is going to be halfway decent. There's never a time when your opponent like doesn't have spells, doesn't have back row, and doesn't have monster effects, and Manifestation isn't good for some reason. So the cool thing about Trap Trick is that it's sort of a Swiss Army knife and can always be one of these cards. All of these cards will eventually be relevant in certain matchups, and then it's basically just like having 3 extra copies of every single one of these cards. So it's really cool. Really like Trap Trick. I know I just spent a lot of time talking about it, but it is like the most important change to this deck, and I'm really happy that I played it. And then the last 5 cards are just like the really good cards, but once again, you can't set these with Trap Trick. So we have 3 Strike, 1 Judgment, and then 1 I Win the Game card, so that's really cool. And then for the extra deck, I'll kind of go fast because, to be completely honest, every time I do this extra deck, it's like the same 13 cards, maybe the same 12 cards. But so we have the 4 cards that you only ever make, which is 3 Hexia, 1 Link Kribo. These are like I said, the only cards you ever make are these ones, which is why Pot of Indulgence is going to be so good in this deck. Maybe it's even worth playing 2 Link Kribo. Probably not, but maybe, right? Because like when Pot of Indulgence comes out, you don't want to banish. I mean, the chances of banishing out of a 15 card extra deck all 4 of these is pretty low. So I think that's why Indulgence is so good in this deck. But as long as you have one of these, you're good. And then 1 Altergeist, Perma Banshee. This card will probably become more relevant because of Indulgence, because sometimes you just need an Altergeist card to make, and I imagine that there will be some cases where you banish like all your Hexias. It can happen, right? There is a chance of that happening. So if you have this card, you can then make that, which is pretty cool. And then we have a bunch of cards that like you literally never make because you honestly like can't make these a lot, because the cases where you're like making these like bigger Link monsters, like the Nightmares, like the Boral cards and stuff, the cases where you would be making these, you've used Faker that turn, and you can't summon non-Altergeist monsters the turn that you use Faker. So a lot of times you can't make those. Don't get cheated by that, by the way. I see people just like sometimes sitting next to me that are playing Altergeist, and they like summon a huge board using like multiple Fakers, and then like they use a Faker on their opponent's turn and then Faker on their turn, and they make Boral load, and it's like, hold on, you can't do that. So just keep that in mind when you're playing against this deck or when you're playing this deck. And then we have some like random utility cards that never come up. Well, I guess the Clarinushka and the Ashik, like these never come up. This used to come up against a Nightmare Goblin because it was non-targeting removal, but not anymore. And then we have the Cherries targets, Isolde, Electromite, and Buster. I think that ABC is like one of this deck's worst matchups. It's not a very popular matchup, but because the extra deck like doesn't matter at all besides those 4 cards, like you have space for stuff like this, and I think that it was worth playing. Just because, yeah, the Columbus Regional, even though I won that match, that was easily like the hardest match of the day was against the ABC player. That was really close. Anyway, for the side deck, we have 3 copies of Reaper, 2 copies of Border for the mirror match, 3 copies of Evenly Match for the slower deck mirror match when you go like second. It can be the mirror match, it can be like against like Sky Triggers as well. It's just a good card all around. Evenly Match into Faker is one of the most ridiculous things that I've ever seen out of a deck like this. See, the cool thing about Faker is that like most trap decks in Yu-Gi-Oh's history like just don't have that good of card like that you can just like make an entire board off of like one card resolving, because especially when you like evenly match, you can summon the Mylusic, make Hexia, add Marionette, or do all that crazy stuff. Most decks just don't have that kind of thing when they're trap based. Like that's for the combo decks. Anyway, 3 Forbidden Pop Crypto that I can't pronounce. This card is especially useful because now we have 6 copies of it with the trap trick. That is so good. I think Thunder Dragon is one of this deck's worst matchups by far. This deck just has a really hard time dealing with a bunch of big monsters, like especially if they like, I don't know, I don't think it's like necessarily correct not to make Colossus against this deck, but a lot of times if they just make like a bunch of big monsters that aren't even necessarily Colossus, it's just like really tough to actually deal with them. But this card completely just shuts out the matchup. You just win instantly, and now you have 6 copies. 2 Summoner Limit for when you go first. This was what was in the deck. I took out the rivalries, 4 Summon Limit, did a bunch of test hands, and I was like, wait a second, I should just play Trap Trick. So that's what I did, but this card's still really good when you go first. And then I like hedged my bets, and I played Wiretap and Dark Bribe. Significantly, like there's a difference here because Dark Bribe is much, they both do basically the same thing, but Dark Bribe is much better against the non-trap decks like Dark Warrior and stuff that are siding into not only Red Reboot and Evenly Match, but also Twin Twisters, because this can hit Twin Twisters, and then it can also hit stuff when your opponent doesn't draw their side deck cards like Soul Charge. But Wiretap is infinitely better in the trap decks, mirror matches like Geist or like Trickstars. Anything that's like trap heavy, Wiretap is just so much better than, because the trap heavy matchups are like really card advantage based, not so much like the tempo like Dark Bribes provides. So in the card advantage based like matchups, the value matchups, you want a card like Wiretap because it's just a 1-for-1 trade. And in some matchups, like against Trickstars, it puts back the reincarnation in the deck so they can't use its graveyard effect, stuff like that. It's just really good. But I think that going forward, I'd probably just play 2 Wiretap. Like, I don't think the hedging was like actually that good of an idea. I think that just playing 2 Wiretap is better. But yeah, anyway, that is my deck profile for Altergeist from the Rosemont Regional. I know I talked a lot, but I really wanted to sort of explain my idea with Trap Trick. I'm not the first person to play that idea. I just thought it was worth talking about because I personally on this channel haven't posted about Trap Trick yet, and I just wanted to play in a tournament with it, and it was very, very good all the times that I drew it. Anyway, I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Goodbye.